Sleeping Warrior is a YouTuber who has featured heavily on this channel before. The first time we heard him, he said this, after I debunked their pathetic attempt at proving Al K wrong.
Do you know, can I just say, Ranty, before you do, Nathan and I discussed whether we should even talk about this, and we came to the conclusion that we weren't going to mention it because we didn't really want to promote him.
Then he popped up again in his debate with Conspiracy Cats, where we showed his poor research skills.
Then get inside a vacuum chamber, turn the pressure off so that it makes the vacuum, and then get him out of it, and he survives. He will then validate that as true. And so far, we haven't been able to do it.
Yes, we have. Okay, we've got the Johnson Space Center vacuum chamber that has tested the suits they plan to use in the Orion spacecraft. This was done in March 2017. Here is a photo of them during the test.
After that, he decided to insult my hair and my corner before asking me about the distance to the sun.
And you sit there with your gay little corner and your gay little haircut and your gay little sphere.
Whoa, hang on. That's a bit much, isn't it? You say all of that when the background of your video looks like a photo taken straight from the portfolio of a failed acting career. More recently, he was featured again when we looked at his top 3 epic fails.
Anthony, if a triangle has the sides 1, 1, and 1, do you know what the angles of the triangle are?
Which kind of triangle are you on about? Are you on about like a right angle triangle?
The triangle has sides 1, 1, and 1. Do you know what the angles are?
The angles would be... Well, it would be an equilateral triangle, wouldn't it?
Right, so what are the angles? Now I'm going to ask this again. If you have a triangle with sides of 1, 1, and 1, what are the angles?
I'm gonna pull up a triangle calculator.
Well, guess what, guys? He's back, and he's more confused than ever. Hello all, welcome along to another episode of Flat Earth Friday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. Yes, the Sleeping Warrior has awoke once more as we delve into his channel and select only the very best face-palming moments for your viewing pleasure. First up, we're going to take a look at Sleeping Warrior's idea of a scientific experiment, and then we're going to look at just how confused he really is when it comes to gravity. So get your best face-palm protection at the ready, sit back, relax and marvel at the wonder that is Sleeping Warrior.
This is my egg. This is my parts per million counter. This is going to measure the parts per million of both these fluids.
I'm sure that Sleeping Warrior knows that this is a TDS meter, or total dissolved solids meter, that gives you a reading in parts per million.
This is tap water, regular tap water. That is the same tap water, but it's been preloaded to save some time with some salt from this to give it a density variation. It's going to measure the density of the tap water.
I'm also sure that he's aware that his TDS meter doesn't give him parts per million readings for salt only, and does in fact gives him readings for parts per million of all dissolved solids.
So while it settles down, it takes a little bit of time. Okay, that's coming in at 212 parts per million tap water. Don't know what that means. It's just a number. It could be unicorn farts. It's just a number.
Doesn't know what it means, and it's just a number. How very scientific of you, Anthony.
So 212 is the recorded density of this one. Mind you, I should have showed that to the camera, shouldn't I? It's coming in at 214 now. So if you want to zoom in on that, it says 214 parts per million. Okay.
Okay, but that isn't the density of the water, that's the amount of dissolved solid in the water. Now, of course, that can affect density, but it isn't the density reading itself.
Back to 0. When I do it to this one is saying this is 302 parts per million. Again, if you want to zoom into that, you can have a look. Okay, so basically 200 to 300. Let's try this one again. $208. Yeah, it's about 200. Then this one's about 300. Yeah, so it's 200 and 300, right? So one's got 100 more parts per million than the other. That tells me that there is a density variation between the two.
I'm sure it does, Anthony, but it proves nothing, and you really need to work on your scientific experiments. About 200 and about 300 won't cut it, I'm afraid. Let's move on to his even further misunderstanding of density and gravity. It just gets worse.
Okay everybody, today we're going to paint like Bob Ross. We're going to start off with my famous density tower.
First off, it's not your tower, and secondly, it's not famous because of you.
And for this illustration, we're going to think that we are the cherry tomato in the middle. So we are the cherry tomato in the middle. Let's remove all the labels so that we don't have any of the labels, and we're going to give these numbers later. So let's add some artifacts. Now that we've got rid of all of the numbers, let's going to add some elements to the picture. We'll start with some ground.
Oh man, this is painful.
This is the ground, and the cherry tomato is now on the ground, and we need to give these values some numbers so that we can make sense of these things. Not that difficult. We'll call the ground 1000. We'll give the arbitrary value of the human to be about 70, and we'll give all the other layers some numbers. We'll finish up at the top with 1.5 for the ping pong ball, and then we'll change the ping pong ball into a sun, and then all of a sudden it's beginning to look a lot like our world, don't you think?
No, I don't think. And it looks like a 7-year-old has had his first go at using paint. And what do the arbitrary numbers represent?
So now let's give it some water. We'll give the water the value of 67 because we know that humans can drown in water without the ability to swim.
Okay, so the numbers represent the density of objects. Well, that's a hash up, isn't it, already? Because water is denser than humans. The average density of a human is around 985 kilograms per metre cubed, and the density of seawater is just over 1,000 kilograms per metre cubed. Now, of course, some people will be denser than others, but if we include a nice lung full of air, then our density gets even lower. Greater volume, pretty much same mass.
And now I think we'll have some clouds, some stratos and cumulonimbus. So we'll stick them some stratos clouds, they're the lower levels, we'll give them the value of 8.7, and the cumulonimbus clouds will give you the value of 4.2 because they're a little bit higher in the atmosphere.
Hang on. So your clouds in this little model you've got here are between 3 and 6 times more dense than the sun? Really? Any credibility that you ever had left, Sleeping Warrior, has just floated away like an 8.7 density cloud.
It's beginning to look a lot like a landscape environment now, don't you think? Let's consider the elements that make up the atmosphere. We know that nitrogen and oxygen are the main component elements to the atmosphere. So we'll bear that in mind in the volume, in stakes of the volume, but they're 2 labels that we're going to use for the layers of the atmosphere.
Don't do this, Anthony, because if you go down this route, you'll end up regretting it.
And we also know that all of the gases have got atomic weights.
He means atomic mass, of course.
So when we look to what the atomic weights are in the periodic table, we can see that nitrogen and oxygen are both 7 and 8. They're numbered 7 and 8 in the periodic table.
Yes, they are their respective atomic numbers, not mass numbers. But let's continue.
All of a sudden it begins to look very explainable without this so-called downwards acceleration force that's not a force, that everybody wants to be a force but isn't there.
He is, of course, talking about gravity, but there is one problem here, and it's to do with the gases that he mentioned. If you do the rough maths on this one and figure out how deep each layer of gas will be based on their atomic masses and their abundance of it in the atmosphere, then you'll end up with a really thin layer of krypton at our feet, a 2-metre zone of carbon dioxide, and then a 50-metre zone of argon, because all of those gases are denser than oxygen. So please, Mr. Warrior, if this really is how the world works, how in the blue blazers are we supposed to breathe?
And even if it is there, nobody can prove it, but nonetheless we're demanded that we accept that it is there. Whatever we live in, we don't need a downwards acceleration force. Everything is relative to us, and this pictorializes for everybody how really straightforward our world really is. I hope this makes sense.
No, it doesn't make sense, and I'll tell you why. This ball here is denser than all the air around it. It's denser than the air here, 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 everywhere. So why does it move through the air that is less dense below it when I drop it? Why doesn't it move left or right? I mean, if you want to be really technical about it, you could argue that the ball should go up because the air above the ball is slightly less dense than the air below it. You need something acting on this ball to allow it to travel through the less denser air below it. Gravity. And as I've mentioned before, gravity is quite weak, about as weak as my arms if you believe some flat earthers. So when this ball floats on water, a medium that is denser than this ball, a buoyant force is created. Now that buoyant force is stronger than the effect of gravity, therefore the ball won't be pulled underwater. It's really not hard to understand. Right, I think that wraps up our look at the mind of Sleeping Warrior. He really does not have a clue about anything he's talking about, does he? Thank you very much for joining me today. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please do like and subscribe. I have been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great weekend and I'll see you all on Tuesday where someone is calling for an uprising. See you then.